I stood in the marble-floored foyer of what had been my home for 38 years, clutching a manila envelope that held the power to shatter the smug confidence on my son Michael's face. The chandelier above, the one I'd spent 3 weeks selecting because Margaret, his wife, had insisted it needed to be statement-worthy, cast fractured light across the gathering of people who'd once called me family. They were sipping champagne, laughing, celebrating Christmas in the house I'd paid for, maintained and loved. And I wasn't supposed to be here. They'd made that perfectly clear 2 weeks ago when Michael sat me down in the kitchen, my kitchen, and told me I was disrupting the family dynamic, and that it was time to step back. At 75, I'd been demoted from matriarch to intruder. But what they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to consider, was that Evelyn Harper had always kept her cards close to her chest. And tonight I was about to play my ace. "Mom!" Michael's voice cut through the chatter, his tone carrying that particular blend of irritation and condescension that had become his default when addressing me. "What are you doing here? We talked about this." I met his gaze with a calmness I'd cultivated over decades of teaching high school English, the kind that made students straighten in their seats. "We did talk about it, Michael. You talked. I listened. Now it's my turn." The room fell silent. Margaret appeared at Michael's elbow, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. My daughter Jennifer emerged from the dining room, her expression caught between curiosity and alarm. Even the grandchildren paused their device scrolling to observe the unfolding drama. I took in each face, memorizing this moment, the last time they'd look at me as the weak link they'd successfully marginalized. "This is inappropriate, Evelyn," Margaret said, dropping the pretense of calling me Mom, as she'd done when they'd needed my down payment for their renovation 3 years ago. "We're having a private family celebration." Private family celebration. I repeated the words slowly, tasting their bitterness. Interesting choice of words, considering this is my house. Or rather, it was. Until I signed it over to Michael 6 months ago, trusting that my son would honor his promise to let me live here for the remainder of my days. I pulled the first document from the envelope. The same son who filed eviction papers last week. Jennifer gasped. My grandson Tyler looked up from his phone, suddenly engaged. Michael's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on defensive anger. "That's not, you're twisting things. We talked about you moving to senior living. It's better for everyone." "Better for everyone or better for you?" I unfolded the eviction notice, letting them see the official stamp, the court date set for January 15th. "I found this in the mail you've been hiding from me, along with some very interesting communications between you and a real estate developer named Harrison Cho." I withdrew another paper. "Apparently, this property is worth significantly more than you led me to believe. $2 million to be precise. And Mr. Cho is prepared to break ground on luxury condominiums the moment the lot is clear." The silence that followed was exquisite. I'd taught the crucible enough times to recognize the moment when comfortable lies began to crumble under the weight of inconvenient truths. Margaret's hand slipped from Michael's arm. Jennifer moved closer, reading the documents over my shoulder. "Where did you get those?" Michael demanded, his authority fracturing into panic. "From my attorney. The one I consulted after I started noticing how eager you were to rush me into Canyon View Estates." I met his eyes, seeing the calculation there, the same expression he'd worn at 12 when I'd caught him stealing money from my purse to buy comic books. I also learned something fascinating about property law in this state. Specifically about transfers made under duress or undue influence, especially involving elderly parents. "My lawyer thinks we have an excellent case for voiding the transfer entirely." "You're being ridiculous," Margaret interjected, her voice shrill. "Michael has your best interests at heart. He's been managing your finances, taking care of this place." "Managing my finances into the ground, you mean?" I pulled out the bank statements I'd obtained that morning. I had $412,000 in my retirement account in January. As of last week, there's $73,000 left. Michael's been the co-signer since Dad died. "Would you like to explain the withdrawals, son? The $50,000 in March? The $120,000 in August?" Jennifer snatched the statements from my hand. "Michael, what the hell? It's complicated," he stammered. "Business investments, opportunities that required liquid capital. Your mother's retirement fund isn't capital for your schemes," Jennifer snapped. her lawyer instincts kicking in. Jesus Christ, Michael, this is elder financial abuse. This is felony territory. I watched my son's world collapse in real time and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a hollow ache where maternal love should have been. This was the boy I'd raised alone after his father died. The child I'd worked double shifts to put through business school. The man I trusted with everything. And he'd been planning to leave me destitute, warehoused in a cut-rate nursing home while he built his empire on the bones of my life's work. But I hadn't come here for a confrontation. I'd come here for justice. I'm not here to press charges, I said quietly, watching relief flood Michael's features. Yet, I'm here to offer an alternative. I pulled out the final document, the one that had taken my attorney 3 weeks to draft. This is a new deed, transferring the property to a family trust. Jennifer is the trustee. The house cannot be sold without unanimous family consent, and I have lifetime residency rights, legally enforceable. You'll sign this tonight, Michael, and you'll start repaying the money you stole, all of it with interest. Or I go to the district attorney Monday morning, and you spend the next 5 to 10 years explaining your investment strategies to a jury. The chandelier's light seemed harsh now, illuminating the holiday decorations that suddenly felt obscene. My grandson Tyler stood, crossing the room to stand beside me. Grandma, I'll be a witness if you need one. I can testify to some stuff I've seen. Tears burned my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. Not here. Thank you, sweetheart. Michael looked at Margaret, then at Jennifer, then back at me. I saw him cycling through options, calculating odds, searching for an angle. This was who my son had become. A man who weighed profit against morality and found the latter wanting. When had it happened? When had I lost him to this hollow ambition? Fine, he said finally, the word hollow. I'll sign. You'll do more than sign. My voice hardened, summoning the steel I'd forged through widowhood and single parenthood and 3 decades of shaping young minds. You'll apologize. To me, to Jennifer, to your children for the example you've set. And you'll mean it, Michael. Or the deal's off. His mouth open, closed. Pride warred with survival instinct. Margaret looked away, abandoning him to his choice. In the end, self-preservation won. I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong. The words were mechanical, hollow. But they were a start. Let me take you back to where this began. Not 2 weeks ago when Michael told me I was no longer welcome at family gatherings, and not 6 months ago when I signed over the deed in a moment of misguided trust. This story begins 47 years ago, in a cramped Queens apartment where a 28-year-old widow named Evelyn Harper sat at a Formica table, staring at a pile of bills and wondering how she'd feed 2 children on a teacher's salary. My husband Richard died 3 months after Jennifer was born, struck by a drunk driver on his way home from his second job. Michael was 5, still asking when Daddy would wake up from his long sleep. We had $14,000 in savings and no life insurance because we were young and invincible, and death was something that happened to other people. I was alone in a way that carved me hollow, responsible for 2 tiny humans who depended on me for everything. I didn't have the luxury of grief. I worked morning sessions at PS 118, taught SAT prep courses in the evenings, graded papers after the kids were asleep. I bought clothes at thrift stores and learned to repair everything myself because service calls cost money we didn't have. When Michael needed glasses in 2nd grade, I worked weekend shifts at a department store for 3 months to pay for them. When Jennifer showed talent for piano, I gave up my own lunches to afford her lessons. But I never made them feel poor. That was my pride, my small victory against the cruelty of circumstance. They had birthday parties and Christmas presents and summer camps. They went to college, good colleges, because I'd saved every spare dollar and filled out every scholarship application with the same meticulous care I'd given their baby books. I wanted them to have choices I'd never had, opportunities unbound by the weight of my sacrifices. Michael thrived. He had Richard's charm and my work ethic, and he graduated with a business degree and big dreams. He met Margaret at a corporate mixer. She was a marketing director, polished and ambitious. They married at 26, bought a condo in Manhattan, started climbing their respective ladders. I was proud. God, I was so proud watching him succeed. Jennifer took a different path. She chose public interest law, defending tenants against predatory landlords. She made a quarter of what Michael did and worked twice the hours, But she came to Sunday dinners with stories about families she'd kept from homelessness, children she'd protected. Different successes equal pride. I retired at 68, a year later than planned because Michael's startup had needed capital, and I'd liquidated part of my 401k to help him. "It's a loan, Mom," he'd promised. "I'll pay you back triple within 2 years." 5 years later I was still waiting, but I didn't press. He was my son. You don't nickel and dime your children. Richard and I had bought the house in Westchester in 1993, before the neighborhood transformed into one of those aspirational suburban enclaves where yoga studios outnumbered delis. We'd paid $200,000 for a 4-bedroom colonial that needed work. I'd spent 30 years maintaining it, updating it, nurturing the garden Richard never got to see flourish. It was where my children grew up, where I'd hosted countless family dinners, where every room held memories crystallized into permanence. After retirement, the house became too large, too quiet. I'd spent months rattling around rooms that echoed with absence, considering downsizing but unable to imagine waking anywhere else. Jennifer lived in Brooklyn, too busy saving the world to visit often. Michael and Margaret had moved to Scarsdale, a mile away but somehow further than Jennifer's hour subway ride. The grandchildren, Tyler, 17, and Madison, 15, existed primarily as faces on my phone screen, their lives documented through photographs I liked but didn't fully understand. Then came Michael's proposal. It was October, 13 months before the Christmas confrontation. He arrived on a Tuesday evening, uncharacteristically nervous. "Mom, Margaret and I have been talking. This house is too much for you. The maintenance, the property taxes, you're on a fixed income. It doesn't make sense." I'd bristled immediately. "I'm managing fine, Michael. I've lived here longer than you've been alive. I'm not criticizing. I'm worried. What happens when you can't handle the stairs? When the roof needs replacing? You're 74, and you're being stubborn about facing reality. What are you suggesting?" He'd laid out his plan with the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to closing deals. I'd signed the house over to him. He'd handle all maintenance, all expenses. I'd continue living there indefinitely. He'd put it in writing. And when I eventually needed care, the house would be sold to cover those costs, with any remaining equity split between him and Jennifer. It's smart planning, Mom. Estate planning. This way you're not hit with inheritance taxes, and I can start making improvements, modernizing things. The value is just going to increase. I'd hesitated. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't articulate what. Why not just keep things as they are? Because if something happens to you, the estate settlement takes months. Jennifer and I could end up in probate disputes. This simplifies everything. You trust me, don't you? And there was the blade sheathed in love. Did I trust my son? Of course I did. He was my son. I'd raised him to be honest and honorable. He wouldn't betray me. I'd consulted Jennifer, who'd been drowning in a case involving foster care negligence. If Michael says he'll take care of you, I believe him. And he's right about the tax implications. Just make sure it's in writing that you have lifetime residency. So I'd done it. Signed the papers at a lawyer's office Michael had selected, transferred the deed, told myself I was being practical. I'd negotiated a simple written agreement. I could live in the house until I died or voluntarily chose to leave. Michael had signed without hesitation, hugged me, promised nothing would change. For 4 months nothing did. Then the small erosions began. In March, Michael mentioned that Margaret had always loved the master bedroom's bay window. Wouldn't I be more comfortable in the smaller guest room on the first floor? It would save me navigating the stairs. I'd refused, feeling territorial in a way that shamed me. It was still my house, even if the deed said otherwise. In May, I'd received a property tax bill. I called Michael confused. "I thought you were handling this?" "Oh, right. Well, since you're living there, it makes sense for you to cover the taxes. It's only fair. $7,300. More than a month of my Social Security and pension combined. But I'd paid it, not wanting to seem ungrateful. In July, I'd come home from a doctor's appointment to find contractors tearing out my kitchen. Michael had arranged a renovation. "It's an investment, Mom. Updates increase value. You'll love the new appliances." I hated every sterile modern inch of it. The renovation cost $80,000. I'd seen the invoice accidentally left on the counter. I'd wondered where that money came from but didn't ask. Asking felt like distrust, and I'd been raised to believe family meant trust without question. In September, Margaret had started dropping by unannounced, measuring windows, taking photos. Just refreshing my Pinterest boards, she'd say with a smile that never reached her eyes. I'd felt like an exhibit in a museum of my own life, observed but not seen. Then came the October evening that changed everything. I'd returned from visiting my sister in Boston to find Michael waiting in the driveway. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation." The words hit like a physical blow. My living situation. As if I were a problem requiring management rather than his mother who'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. What about it? Margaret and I have been researching senior living communities. There are some excellent facilities nearby. Canyon View Estates has a great reputation. Independent living for now, but they have full care when you need it. They arrange activities, provide meals, handle maintenance. You'd be around people your own age. I don't want to be around people my own age. I want to be in my home. That's the thing, Mom. It's not really practical anymore. This house is meant for a family. Tyler's going to college next year. And Madison will need a quiet space for studying. We've been thinking about moving in, making this the family home base. I'd stared at him, certain I'd misunderstood. You want me to move out so you can move in? I want you to transition to a safer, more appropriate environment while you're still healthy enough to adjust. Canyon View has an opening. I've already put down a deposit. Without asking me? I'm asking now. The deposit's refundable if you say no, but Mom, this makes sense. You're being emotional instead of practical. Emotional. As if the house where I'd raised him, where his father's memory lived in every board and nail, was just an asset to be liquidated when convenient. As if 40 years of my life could be dismissed as sentiment. I'm not going anywhere, Michael. His jaw tightened. Be reasonable. You signed the house over. Legally I can. Can what? Evict your mother. He'd had the grace to look uncomfortable. Let's not make this ugly. I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. Everyone except me. He'd left then, and I'd spent the night staring at ceiling shadows, wondering when I'd become an inconvenience to be managed rather than a mother to be loved. In the morning I'd called Jennifer. He can't actually evict you, she'd said immediately. You have a written agreement for lifetime residency. He'd have to prove you violated terms, and just living there isn't violation. But could he make it so unpleasant I'd want to leave? Her silence answered everything. 2 weeks later, Michael had invited me to lunch. Not at the house, at a restaurant neutral territory. He'd brought Margaret, which should have warned me. Mom, about our conversation. I handled it badly. I don't want you to move out. Relief had flooded through me, sweet and naive. But we do need to establish some boundaries. The house needs to function for all of us, and you've been resistant to necessary changes. Going forward, we'd appreciate if you'd check before inviting people over. And Sunday dinners should rotate. Sometimes we'll host, sometimes Jennifer, sometimes you can visit us. We just need more flexibility. I'd nodded, wanting peace, willing to compromise. Also the family holidays. They've gotten complicated with everyone's schedules. We're thinking of doing an adults-only Christmas this year. Just Michael, Margaret, Jennifer, and her partner. More intimate, less stressful. But I've hosted Christmas for 40 years. Exactly. You've earned a break. Let us take over. I'd looked at Margaret, who'd examined her salad with great interest. I'd looked at my son, who'd betrayed nothing but reasonable concern. And I'd understood with crystal clarity I was being phased out. Slowly, gently, with the inexorable patience of waves eroding stone. They were making me disappear. I see. Great. I'm glad you understand. We're just trying to modernize family traditions, make things easier on everyone. Everyone. That word again. Everyone except the elderly woman who'd built the family they were now restructuring without her. I'd gone home and done what I should have done months earlier. I'd called a real estate attorney. Not the one Michael had recommended, but one Jennifer had mentioned in passing. A woman named Sandra Liu who specialized in elder law. Sandra had listened to my story with an expression that shifted from professional sympathy to barely contained outrage. Mrs. Harper, I'm going to be direct. Your son is engaged in a pattern of elder financial abuse and manipulation. The house transfer, the unexpected expenses, the pressure to move. This is a textbook case. And I'd bet money there's more you haven't discovered yet. Like what? Like whether he's accessed your other accounts. When did he become co-signer on your finances? After Richard died. I was overwhelmed and Michael offered to help with bills. He's had access ever since. We need to run a full audit. Today. The audit revealed what I'd been too trusting to see. $339,000 withdrawn over 18 months. Most disguised as home maintenance or investment opportunities that I'd apparently agreed to but couldn't remember authorizing. $50,000 had gone to covering Michael's business debts. Another $80,000 had funded the kitchen renovation I'd never requested. $75,000 had simply vanished into consulting fees for a company that didn't seem to exist. My life savings, the buffer between me and destitution, depleted by the child I'd sacrificed everything to raise. We can prosecute, Sandra said. This is felony theft. He'd face serious prison time. He's my son. He's a thief who happens to share your DNA. Mrs. Harper, he's not going to stop. Men like this, and yes, I've seen dozens, they rationalize everything. He probably tells himself he's entitled to this money, that he'll pay you back eventually, that you don't really need it. He'll take every penny and sleep soundly. I'd sat in her office staring at spreadsheets that quantified betrayal and felt something inside me. Some last vestige of maternal delusion crystallize into rage. What are my options? Several. We can void the house transfer on grounds of undue influence. We can file criminal charges. Or, she'd paused, studying me. We can let him think he's gotten away with it and prepare a trap that protects you completely. I'm listening. Sandra had smiled, the expression sharp and fierce. Your son wants you gone, but he needs you compliant. If you threaten him legally, he'll lawyer up, drag everything through courts for years. But if we let him proceed with his plan, document everything, then present him with an ultimatum at the moment of his victory, well, that's when people make panicked mistakes. We get leverage. We get protection. And we get justice. You want me to let him evict me? I want you to appear to let him. Actually, I want you to discover the eviction he's already filed. Which he has, by the way. I checked court records this morning. He filed last week. She'd show me the documents. Eviction proceedings, claiming I damaged the property and violated terms of my residency agreement. Complete fabrications, but official enough to force me into court. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to prepare a family trust, ironclad, with Jennifer as trustee, and you as lifetime beneficiary. We're going to compile all evidence of Michael's theft. Then we're going to wait for a moment, Christmas maybe, when he feels most secure, and we're going to present him with a choice. Sign everything over to the trust and start repayment or face prosecution. We'll get it all on record with witnesses legally binding. He signs or he goes to prison. Simple. And if he refuses? Then you prosecute. But men like Michael are fundamentally cowards. When confronted with real consequences, they fold. I've seen it 100 times. I thought about it for 3 days. Thought about the boy who'd cried in my arms after his father's funeral, promising he'd take care of me forever. Thought about the man who'd stolen my security without apparent remorse. Thought about the grandmother I barely got to see, because Michael had quietly poisoned his children against me with 1,000 small comments about how I was fragile and not really up to handling teenagers. On the 4th day, I'd called Sandra. Let's set the trap. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I'd played the role of oblivious elderly mother with Academy Award-worthy commitment. I'd pretended not to notice when Michael redirected my mail to a P.O. box he controlled. I'd seemed confused when he'd suggested I wasn't really invited to Thanksgiving. I'd let him believe I was exactly what he needed me to be. Weak, isolated, easy to dispose of. Meanwhile, Sandra had prepared our arsenal. The trust documents. The financial forensic analysis. Statements from neighbors about Michael's predatory pattern. A consultation with the district attorney's office establishing that yes, we had a prosecutable case. And then came the phone call from Tyler. Grandma? I need to tell you something. Dad doesn't know I'm calling. My grandson's voice had been strained, Adult in a way that broke my heart. What is it, sweetheart? Dad and Mom are planning a big Christmas party at the house. Your house. They're not inviting you. I heard Dad tell Madison that you're not really part of the family dynamic anymore, and it's better if you're not there. Grandma, that's bullshit. It's your house. You should be there. Tyler. And there's other stuff. I've seen Dad going through your papers. I heard him on the phone talking about liquidating the property once you're situated elsewhere. He's been lying to you. I didn't want to believe it, but I've been paying attention, and Grandma, he's been really shitty to you. The profanity had mattered less than the pain underneath. My grandson had noticed what I tried to hide. Thank you for telling me. But don't worry. I'm handling it. Are you? Because you seem kind of, I don't know, like you're just accepting it. Tyler, I taught high school for 30 years. I learned a long time ago that you don't react to bullies, you outthink them. Your father thinks I'm a helpless old woman. That's his mistake. So you have a plan? I have a very good plan. And when it happens, I need you to be strong. What you're going to see won't be easy, but it's necessary. Can you do that? Grandma, I will testify in court if you need me to. I'm not letting Dad do this to you. I cried after that call. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of knowing I hadn't failed completely as a mother. One generation removed, but my values had taken root. Tyler understood that family meant loyalty, not convenience. The eviction notice arrived December 10th, delivered to the P.O. box. Michael had arranged for me to be formally served during Christmas week. Maximum emotional impact. But I'd gotten to the mail first, documented everything, added it to our file. Sandra had called immediately. This is it. We have everything we need. When do you want to do this? Christmas Eve. He's having his family party, the one I'm not invited to. That's when I walk in with the documents. Mrs. Harper, are you sure? That's going to be nuclear? Yes. But my son needs to understand something. He can take my money. He can take my house. But he cannot take my dignity. And he cannot rewrite history to pretend I'm not the foundation everything he has is built on. So on Christmas Eve, I dressed in the emerald dress Richard had loved, the one I'd kept for 40 years. I'd done my makeup carefully, styled my hair, wore the pearl earrings Jennifer had given me for my 70th birthday. I'd looked in the mirror and seen not a weak, disposable old woman, but a survivor who'd raised 2 children alone, built a career, and earned every goddamn dollar stolen from her. Sandra had offered to come with me. I'd refused. Some things you had to do alone. I'd driven to the house, my house, parked on the street, and stared at the windows glowing with holiday lights I'd bought and hung for decades. Inside, my family was celebrating without me, in my space, drinking my wine from my glasses, eating from my dishes. The audacity of it burned. Then I'd picked up the envelope and walked to the door I'd walked through 10,000 times. Michael had tried to stop me at the threshold. Margaret had claimed it was a private celebration. But I'd walked past them both, into the living room where Jennifer stood looking uncomfortable, where Tyler and Madison sat with expressions caught between confusion and loyalty, where extended family I barely recognized mingled with expensive catering I hadn't authorized. And I'd said the words that changed everything. This is my house. Or rather, it was. The confrontation that followed would define the rest of our relationships. But as I stood there, surrounded by people who'd taken me for granted, holding documents that represented months of careful preparation, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not power over others, I'd never wanted that. But power over my own life, my own narrative, my own dignity. They tried to write me out of the family story. I was writing myself back in. With a vengeance. The silence after Michael's hollow apology stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Jennifer broke it first, her lawyer brain already processing implications. Mom, I need to read these documents. All of them. She took the papers from my hands, spreading them across the dining room table I'd bought at an estate sale in 1989. Her expression shifted as she read. Shock, fury, calculation. Margaret had retreated to the kitchen, her Christmas hostess persona crumbling. Through the doorway, I could see her gripping the marble countertop, the one she'd chosen during the renovation I'd never wanted, her shoulders rigid with barely contained panic. Tyler stood beside me, protective. Madison watched from the stairs, Her phone forgotten for once, witnessing the implosion of the family narrative she'd been fed her entire life. Michael. Jennifer's voice was ice. You stole $300,000 from Mom. You filed eviction papers. You lied about business investments. What the actual fuck is wrong with you? It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You committed felony theft and elder abuse. That's not complicated. That's criminal. Michael's face had gone from red to pale, his confident businessman persona dissolving into something smaller, more desperate. I was going to pay it all back. The investments just needed more time. I was protecting her assets. By stealing them? By trying to make her homeless. Jennifer's laugh was bitter. You're pathetic. Everyone calmed down. Margaret re-entered, having composed herself. This is a family matter. We should discuss it privately, not air everything in front of the children. The children are 17 and 15, I said quietly. Old enough to understand that actions have consequences. Old enough to learn that family doesn't mean accepting abuse. Abuse? That's ridiculous. Michael has been trying to help. Help himself to my money? Help me out of my house? That kind of help. Margaret's composure cracked. You don't understand the pressures we're under. Michael's business has had setbacks. We have expenses. So you decided my retirement fund was your emergency account. I felt my voice rising and controlled it. Anger was a tool. Rage was a weakness. I worked 40 years for that money. I saved every spare dollar. And you treated it like a slush fund. We were going to repay you. When? After I was dead and couldn't object. The words hung in the air, ugly and true. Madison made a small sound from the stairs, half sob, half gasp. Tyler's hand found mine, his grip tight. Jennifer finished reading the trust documents, then the financial forensics. When she looked up, her expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes burned. Mom, this is airtight. If Michael signs, the house transfers to the trust, you have legally enforceable lifetime residency, and he's bound to repayment terms. If he doesn't sign, I prosecute. I called the DA's office last week. They're very interested in the case. Michael sat down heavily, his expensive suit suddenly seeming too large for him. You'd really do that? Send your own son to prison? Would you really evict your own mother? Make her homeless at 75? I moved to stand directly in front of him, forcing eye contact. I don't want you in prison, Michael. I want you to be the man I raised you to be. The man who understood loyalty and gratitude and basic human decency. But if that man is gone, if all that's left is this hollow thing that calculates relationships in terms of profit, then yes, I'd testify. I watch you sentenced. And I'd sleep soundly. He flinched as though I'd struck him. Good. Some part of him was still human enough to feel shame. There's more. Jennifer was scrolling through the financial documents on her laptop, which she'd pulled from her bag. Michael, you used Mom's stolen funds to cover margin calls on stock trades. You took $50,000 last March. I remember you called me that month crying about your business failing. I offered to lend you money. You said no, said you'd figured it out. You'd figured it out by robbing Mom. It was a loan. It was theft. You never asked. You just took. Jennifer stood, pacing the length of the room. How did I miss this? I'm a lawyer. I should have seen. Don't. I stopped her. He was clever. He waited until you were drowning in casework. He timed his requests for when I was vulnerable. He manipulated both of us. That's not your failure. It's his. Mom's right, Tyler said, his young voice surprisingly steady. Dad's been weird about money for like 2 years. I heard him fighting with Mom about credit card debt. She wanted to cut back. He said they deserved nice things. He kept talking about how this house was going to be their nest egg. I didn't realize he meant your nest egg, Grandma. Madison descended the stairs slowly. Dad told me you were getting forgetful. He said we had to be patient with you because you were declining. He made it sound like you were basically senile. The word hit harder than I'd expected. I'm 75, not brain dead. I run 3 miles 4 times a week. I volunteer at the library. I'm reading Proust in the original French. Declining. My God. He needed us to see you as helpless, Jennifer said, understanding crystallizing. If we thought you were incompetent, we wouldn't question his control over your finances. Classic predatory pattern. I've seen it in client situations but never thought. She stopped, pressing fingers against her temples. Never thought my own brother would be the predator. Michael had been silent during this dissection, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then what was it supposed to be like? I asked. Walk me through your plan. At what point was I supposed to benefit? He looked up, and I saw something in his expression that might have been genuine anguish. I was drowning. The business had 3 bad quarters. We'd leveraged everything, the condo, our retirement accounts. Margaret's father stopped speaking to us because we borrowed and couldn't repay. I kept thinking one good quarter, one big deal, and I'd fix everything. But it kept getting worse. And you had all this money just sitting there, not earning anything significant. It was earning security. Peace of mind. A buffer against the world's cruelty. I know. But I kept thinking I'll borrow $50,000, make it back with the Portland contract, repay her before she notices. Except Portland fell through. So I borrowed more to cover the shortfall. And more. And it became this thing I couldn't control, this spiral. So you decided to take the house too. His silence was answer enough. Margaret re-entered the conversation, her voice tight. The house wasn't about money. Not directly. We need somewhere to live. We're losing the condo. The bank is foreclosing next month. We have nowhere to go. The admission dropped like a bomb. Jennifer's head snapped around. Tyler's mouth fell open. Even Michael looked surprised that Margaret had confessed. You're being foreclosed on? Jennifer's voice carried a note of hysteria. Jesus Christ, how bad is this? $700,000 in debt, Margaret said flatly. Credit cards, business loans, the mortgage. Michael's business is insolvent. We've been pretending everything was fine, but it's not. It's a disaster. We need this house. So you were going to evict Mom and move in? Rent-free? While she went where exactly? Canyon View Estates costs $3,000 a month for independent living. Mom's pension and Social Security would cover it. Barely, but it would work. I felt dizzy trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. You calculated exactly how much my survival would cost, and decided anything beyond that was yours for the taking. We're family, Margaret said, and there was genuine confusion in her tone. Family helps each other. You have resources. We need help. Why is that wrong? Because you didn't ask. The words exploded from me. Decades of suppressed rage finding voice. You didn't sit me down and say, Mom, we're in trouble. Can you help? You stole. You manipulated. You lied. You tried to make me homeless while pretending it was for my own good. That's not family. That's predation. We knew you'd say no, Michael said quietly. You'd have lectured us about living within our means and making responsible choices. You'd have been disappointed in me. I couldn't see that look on your face. So instead you destroyed my trust completely? That was the better option. He had no answer. What answer could justify such breathtaking selfishness? Jennifer pulled out her phone. I'm calling Sandra Lou. We need her to witness the signing, make it officially binding. Mom, where's the pen? I produced the pen I brought specifically for this purpose. A Mont Blanc Richard had given me for our 15th anniversary, the last gift before his death. The symbolism felt right. Richard would have handled this differently, with more grace perhaps, but he would have protected me. In his absence, I had to protect myself. I need guarantees, Michael said, some spark of negotiation instinct flickering to life. If I agree to repayment, I need immunity from prosecution. Written immunity. You're not in a position to negotiate, Jennifer snapped. Actually, he is. Sandra Lou's voice came from the foyer. I hadn't heard her arrive, but there she stood, professional and formidable in a black suit. Mrs. Harper asked me to be present to witness. And Michael's right, if we want this resolved without courts, we need immunity terms. But they're conditional. He violates any term of the trust or repayment agreement. Immunity evaporates. He's immediately prosecutable. She entered the dining room, set down her briefcase, pulled out additional documents. I prepared an immunity agreement contingent on complete compliance. He signs the trust documents, signs the repayment schedule, signs the immunity waiver. Everything's linked. He steps out of line even once. Mrs. Harper can file charges with all evidence already compiled and ready for grand jury. The repayment schedule, Michael said. What are the terms? Sandra slid a paper across the table. $339,000, plus 6% annual interest, repaid over 10 years. Monthly payments of $3,300. Miss one payment, immunity voids. Transfer any assets to avoid payment, immunity voids. Attempt to challenge the trust, immunity voids. $3,300 a month? That's impossible. I just told you we're bankrupt. Then you better unbankrupt yourself. Get a job. Sell your possessions. Move into the basement here for all I care. Your financial crisis is not your mother's problem anymore. She's done subsidizing your irresponsibility. Margaret made a strangled sound. We're supposed to live in the basement? Like servants. You're supposed to accept consequences, I said. Something you've both avoided for far too long. The house has a finished basement apartment. Your father and I created it for rental income we never pursued. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, separate entrance. You can live there rent-free while you recover financially. Tyler and Madison can have the upstairs bedrooms. I'll stay in the master. We'll share the main living areas. You'll have shelter. I'll have family around. Everyone survives. That's humiliating, Margaret breathed. More or less humiliating than prison? Jennifer asked sharply. Michael stared at the repayment schedule, and I watched him calculate. With his business failed, job prospects uncertain, and debts crushing, $3,300 monthly was genuinely difficult. But not impossible. Not if he worked, budgeted, lived within means. He'd have to sacrifice comfort, pride, autonomy. He'd have to become what he tried to make me. Diminished, dependent, powerless. Poetic justice, Sandra had called it. I called it education. If I sign, we can move in? Tonight. After you pack your essentials and make the drive, yes. The basement's furnished. It's not luxurious, but it's shelter. More than you were going to give me. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen, and I felt a lurch of vertigo. This was happening. My son was going to sign away his control, admit his guilt, accept consequences. Part of me wanted to stop him, to offer forgiveness without conditions, to revert to the mother who'd fixed every childhood problem with cookies and hugs. But that mother had raised a man who felt entitled to steal from her. Maybe she'd been too forgiving. Maybe mercy without accountability had taught him that love meant freedom from consequences. Not anymore. Michael signed the trust documents first. His signature was rushed, sloppy, so different from the confident flourish he usually affected. Then the repayment schedule. Then the conditional immunity agreement. Each signature a small defeat, a chip in the armor of his inflated self-regard. Sandra witnessed each signature, added her own, sealed copies into envelopes. These are legally binding as of now. Mrs. Harper, you're protected. Michael, you're committed. Everyone understand the terms. Nods all around. The formality of it felt absurd amid the Christmas decorations, the half-eaten catering, the shattered family pretense. Good. Now, Mrs. Harper has requested one more thing. Sandra looked at Michael and Margaret. Public acknowledgement. Not for her ego but for the record. She wants you to explain to your children exactly what you did and why it was wrong. In detail. So they learn the right lessons from this disaster. Michael's face drained of remaining color. You can't. I can and I am, I said. Tyler and Madison deserve the truth. Not the sanitized version where grandma's confused and you're the patient caretaker. The real version where you stole and lied. They're nearly adults. They can handle truth. Tyler and Madison had been quiet during the legal proceedings, but now Tyler spoke up. Yeah, Dad. I'd really like to hear you explain this. Madison nodded, her expression harder than I'd ever seen on her young face. Michael looked at Margaret, who looked away. No help there. He was alone with his shame, finally nowhere to hide. I stole money from Grandma, he said, voice mechanical. $339,000 over 18 months. I took it without asking, justified it to myself as borrowing but never actually planned repayment. I hid bills from her, redirected her mail, tried to evict her so I could sell her house. I lied to both of you about her mental state to make you less sympathetic toward her. I manipulated everyone. And it was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. Why? Madison's voice was small but steady. Why would you do that to Grandma? She's always been nice to us. Because I was desperate and selfish. Because I made bad business decisions and instead of admitting failure, I tried to hide it by taking from someone who trusted me. Because I'm weak and thought I could get away with it. Do you even love us? Tyler asked, and the question hit like a physical blow. Or are we just assets you manage to? Michael's facade shattered completely. He started crying. Not elegant tears but messy gasping sobs that shook his whole frame. I love you. God, I love you both so much. I'm so sorry you're seeing this. I'm so sorry I failed you. Margaret wrapped her arms around him, and I watched my grown son weep like a child. Part of me wanted to comfort him. The mother in me still remembered soothing his nightmares, bandaging his scraped knees, promising everything would be okay. But another part, the part that had survived widowhood and single parenthood and his systematic betrayal, remained unmoved. Tears weren't repentance. Tears were just salt water. Change required action, consistency, time. Jennifer was crying too, quietly, standing apart from everyone. I went to her, gathered her into a hug. I should have protected you, she whispered. I'm the lawyer. I should have noticed. You couldn't have known. He was careful. And you've been protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's work that matters. Don't diminish it. Our family is broken, Mom. Our family has been broken. Now we're trying to heal. Healing looks ugly before it looks beautiful. Be patient. Sandra began packing her materials, efficient and unruffled by the emotional carnage. Mrs. Harper, you have my number if you need anything. Everyone else, read the documents carefully. Understand the terms. This arrangement works only if everyone adheres strictly to the agreements. One violation and we're in court. She left and we stood in the wreckage of Christmas Eve. The catering remained untouched. The champagne had gone flat. The picture-perfect holiday celebration had devolved into legal proceedings and brutal honesty. But underneath the devastation, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not naive hope for instant reconciliation, but realistic hope that we'd hit bottom and might slowly climb back towards something functional if not ideal. Tyler, Madison, pack bags for tonight, I said, taking charge. You're staying in your old rooms upstairs. Michael, Margaret, go collect your essentials. You'll move into the basement apartment temporarily. Jennifer, stay with me while they're gone. We need to talk. Everyone moved, grateful for concrete tasks that didn't require emotional processing. Within minutes, the house was empty except for Jennifer and me, sitting at the dining table surrounded by legal documents. Are you okay? Jennifer asked. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I should be more upset or more victorious, but mostly I'm just tired. Tired of being treated as expendable. Tired of making myself small to accommodate everyone else's comfort. You were never small, Mom. You just let people pretend you were. Maybe. Or maybe I needed to be small to survive. After your father died, I couldn't afford pride or ego. I just worked and sacrificed and hoped my children would remember. That they'd care for me the way I'd cared for them. Michael forgot. But I didn't. I won't. I know, sweetheart. You've been my constant. I should have leaned on you more instead of trying to spare you worry. We're in this together now. Full transparency. You don't hide things to protect me. Deal. Deal. Michael and Margaret returned 90 minutes later with suitcases and shell-shocked expressions. Tyler and Madison came through the door minutes after, laden with backpacks and duffel bags. The house suddenly felt crowded with physical presence and emotional weight. Ground rules, I announced, summoning my teacher voice, the one that had controlled classrooms of restless teenagers. This is my house. I make the rules. You're welcome to stay. But my welcome is conditional on respect and cooperation. No more lies. No more manipulation. We communicate directly, honestly. If this arrangement doesn't work, you find somewhere else. Clear. A chorus of assent. Michael looked like a man in shock, going through motions without full awareness. Margaret had reverted to cold efficiency, unpacking with mechanical precision. The children seemed relieved to have structure, even structure born from crisis. I showed Michael and Margaret to the basement apartment, the space Richard and I had finished during a hopeful summer when Jennifer was 12 and Michael was 17, imagining we might house college students or provide a landing spot for family in need. Never imagining it would house my son fleeing the consequences of his own moral bankruptcy. The apartment was dated but comfortable. 2 small bedrooms, an open kitchen living area, a bathroom with original 1990s tile. Margaret surveyed it with barely concealed horror. "It's temporary," I reminded her. "Work hard, recover financially, find your own place. This is a gift, not a punishment. Though I understand it might feel like both." "How long?" she asked tightly. "As long as it takes to get back on your feet. Could be 6 months, could be 2 years. Depends on your effort and luck. But you won't be homeless. You'll be here with family working toward stability. That's more than you were going to give me." She nodded stiffly, began unpacking in silence. Michael sat on the dated floral couch, staring at walls. I left them to their adjustment, climbing the stairs that suddenly felt steeper than before. Adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Tyler found me in the kitchen, making tea with hands that trembled slightly. "Grandma? Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Are you okay? Like really okay? Does what Dad did, that's really messed up. And you're being so calm about it, but you shouldn't have to be. You can be mad. You should be mad." I poured hot water over chamomile, watching the tea bag steep, buying time to find words. "I am mad. Furious, actually. But I've learned that anger is a tool, not an identity. I used my anger to plan, to protect myself, to create consequences. Now I need to use it to heal. And healing requires boundaries, not rage." "That's really wise. I'm sorry I didn't see what he was doing sooner. You're 17. You're not responsible for monitoring your father's ethics. That's his job, and he failed spectacularly. But you saw the truth when it mattered. You called me. You stood with me tonight. That takes courage." He hugged me then, fierce and protective, and I held my grandson and felt the generation-skipping love that sometimes flows clearer than parent-child bonds. Tyler had his grandfather's sense of justice, his great-grandfather's steel spine. Whatever Michael had failed to learn, Tyler was absorbing. Madison appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "Grandma? Can I stay up here? I don't want to go downstairs yet. Dad's being weird and Mom's crying and it's just a lot. You're always welcome here. Both of you. This is your home as much as mine." Jennifer emerged from the guest room where she'd been making calls to her partner, explaining the evening's revelations. "Mom, I'm staying the night. Actually, I'm staying the week. I need to make sure this transition goes smoothly, and Michael doesn't try anything stupid. You don't need to babysit me. I'm not babysitting you. I'm protecting you. And myself. And these kids. Michael's desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. Until he stabilizes, I want eyes on the situation." I didn't have energy to argue. Truth was, having Jennifer here felt like armor against the vulnerability of having Michael and Margaret in the basement, technically part of my household now, neither guests nor enemies but something undefined and uncomfortable. We ended up in the living room, Jennifer, Tyler, Madison, and me, while downstairs remained silent. Jennifer ordered pizza because no one had eaten the expensive catering. We ate cross-legged on the floor like a strange, trauma-bonded picnic, not discussing what had happened but not avoiding it either. Madison asked about my childhood. Tyler wanted to know about his grandfather. Jennifer told stories about growing up in this house, about holidays before everything got complicated. It felt like excavating family history, reclaiming narrative that had been paved over by Michael's revisionism. I told them about Richard. Not the sanitized version, but the real man who'd been funny and flawed and deeply kind. I told them about surviving his death, about the terror and determination of single parenthood. I told them about their father as a child, sweet and sensitive and eager to please. "What happened to him?" Madison asked. "How did he become this?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe success came too easily at first, so failure felt like betrayal instead of feedback. Maybe I protected him too much, fixed too many problems so he never learned resilience. Maybe he married someone who valued appearance over substance and lost himself trying to maintain the facade. Or maybe," I paused, facing a painful truth, "maybe the capacity for this was always there, and circumstances revealed rather than created it. That's terrifying, Tyler said. The idea that people can just hide who they really are until they can't anymore. People are complicated. Your father isn't a monster. He's a weak man who made terrible choices. There's a difference. Monsters enjoy causing harm. Your father justified harm to avoid his own discomfort. That's more pathetic than evil, but the damage is real either way. We talked until past midnight, until exhaustion forced Madison and Tyler to bed. Jennifer and I sat in the quiet house, listening to the furnace cycle, the old wood settling, the ambient sounds of a structure with history. What happens now? Jennifer asked. Long term, I mean. Can you forgive him? I don't know. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process, and it requires genuine change from the person being forgiven. Michael signed papers tonight. He cried. But does he understand what he did? Or does he just regret getting caught? Time will tell. And if he doesn't change? If he resents you for this? Then I'll have protected myself from further damage. The trust is ironclad. He can't take the house. He can't access my remaining funds. I moved everything to accounts he doesn't know about. He can be angry, but he can't hurt me financially anymore. And if he becomes abusive in other ways, he's out. I'm done sacrificing my peace for his comfort. I'm proud of you, Mom. I know that sounds patronizing, but I am. You could have just taken the abuse, moved to that shitty senior home, lived out your days bitter and diminished. Instead, you fought. You won. Winning feels less triumphant than I'd imagined. Mostly it just feels necessary. We went to our respective rooms. I lay in my bed in my room in my house, and stared at the ceiling fan Richard had installed in 1998, the blades slightly dusty because I could no longer reach them safely. Tomorrow I'd ask Tyler to clean them. Tomorrow I'd start navigating this strange new family configuration. Tomorrow I'd be 75 years old, sharing my house with the son who tried to steal it. But tonight I was safe. Protected by law, supported by Jennifer, loved by grandchildren who'd seen the truth. It was enough. It had to be enough. Sleep came eventually, restless but real. The first 2 weeks were excruciating. Michael and Margaret stayed in the basement, emerging only for necessities. When we crossed paths, conversations were stilted, polluted by resentment and shame. Margaret couldn't look at me. Michael oscillated between apologetic and defensive, his moods unpredictable. Tyler and Madison adapted more quickly. They claimed their old rooms, established routines, treated the living situation as normal through sheer force of will. Tyler started cooking dinner 3 nights a week, elaborate meals that brought us to the table together whether we wanted to be there or not. Madison appointed herself family social coordinator, insisting on Sunday game nights that were initially awkward but gradually became bearable. Jennifer stayed for 10 days, returning to Brooklyn only after confirming that Michael was complying with trust terms and making his first repayment installment. $3,300, transferred on schedule, documented and logged. 1 payment down, 119 to go. Sandra checked in weekly, monitoring the situation with professional detachment. How's the arrangement working? She'd ask, and I'd report truthfully. Uncomfortable but functional. No violations, no crises, just the grinding awkwardness of a family learning to exist in proximity to its own failures. Michael found work after 3 weeks of searching. Not the executive position he'd held, but project management at a mid-sized firm, making 1/3 of his previous salary. His pride took a beating, but the paychecks covered payments with little left over. Margaret took a position at a marketing agency, similarly diminished from her previous status. They worked long hours, came home exhausted, spoke little. I found unexpected satisfaction in the routine. I'd wake at 6, make coffee, sit in the kitchen I'd reclaimed as mine. Tyler would appear around 6:30 and we'd have breakfast together. He'd talk about college applications, I'd talk about books I was reading, and for 30 minutes we'd exist in a bubble where family meant connection instead of litigation. Madison started bringing friends home, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The house filled with teenage energy, laughter echoing in rooms that had been silent too long. Her friends called me Grandma Evelyn, asked about my life, treated me like a person with history worth knowing. I hadn't realized how invisible I'd become until visibility returned. One evening, 6 weeks into the arrangement, Michael knocked on my bedroom door. Mom? Can we talk? Every protective instinct screamed caution, but I opened the door. Come in. He sat in the reading chair by the window, the one Richard had occupied for countless evenings. He looked older than his 47 years, worn down by consequences and diminished circumstances. I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the performative thing I did Christmas Eve. He stopped, struggling. I've been seeing a therapist. Margaret insisted. At first I went just to appease her, but it's been helpful. Uncomfortable, but helpful. What have you learned? That I'm entitled. That I assumed your sacrifices meant you owed me continued support indefinitely. That I viewed you as a resource instead of a person. That I was so busy managing appearances, I lost track of actual values. He met my eyes and I saw genuine pain there. I destroyed your trust. I don't know if I can ever repair it. But I need you to know I'm trying to understand what I did, and why it was so profoundly wrong. Understanding is a start. But change requires sustained action, not just insight. I know. The repayment schedule. I won't miss a payment. I'll work as many jobs as needed. And the therapy I'm committing to at least a year. And he swallowed hard. I'm trying to be a better father. Tyler told me he's been afraid to disappoint me because I've been so focused on success metrics. That broke something in me. He should never be afraid of me. No, he shouldn't. Did I ruin everything? Is there a path back to not what we were? I know that's gone. But something? Some version of functional. I considered his question carefully. I don't know, Michael. That depends on who you become and how consistently you maintain it. Right now, you're early in the process of confronting yourself. It's easy to be remorseful when consequences are fresh. The real test is 6 months from now, a year from now, when you're tired of being the family pariah and tempted to blame me for enforcing boundaries. You think I'll backslide? I think it's possible. People usually do. But I hope you won't. For your sake, not mine. Because the person you were becoming, that hollow, grasping version of yourself, that wasn't someone you could live with long term. You were eating yourself alive with justifications and denial. He nodded slowly. The therapist said something similar. That I was building a narrative where I was the victim of circumstances instead of the author of choices. It's been hard dismantling that narrative. Growth is hard. Supposed to be. Easy transformations don't last. We talked for another hour, not resolving anything but establishing a fragile dialogue. When he left, I felt cautiously optimistic. Not convinced, but open to possibility. Maybe Michael could change. Maybe this crisis would become the inflection point where he chose integrity over convenience. Maybe. Or maybe he'd revert to type the moment he felt secure. Time would reveal which version would emerge victorious. 3 months in, we hit our first real conflict. Michael challenged one of the trust provisions, claiming it was overly restrictive regarding property improvements. Jennifer shut him down immediately, citing the immunity clause. He backed off, but the incident reminded everyone how fragile our peace was. He's testing boundaries, Sandra said when I called her. Classic pattern. He's wondering if you'll enforce consequences or if this was all bluff. Stand firm. The moment you compromise, he'll push harder. I stood firm. The trust provisions remained unchanged. Michael accepted this with barely concealed resentment, and for a week the house felt like a Cold War zone. Then Tyler intervened. He sat his father down and said, in the blunt way of teenage honesty, Dad, stop being an idiot. Grandma gave you a gift. You could be homeless or in prison. Instead, you're here rebuilding. Stop acting like the victim and start acting grateful. From 17-year-old to 47-year-old, the truth delivered without softening. And somehow, from Tyler, Michael could hear it. The resentment dialed back. Not eliminated, but manageable. We developed rhythms. Sunday dinners became mandatory. Everyone present. Everyone contributing. We'd sit at the dining table I defended so fiercely, and we'd eat and talk and practice being a family. Not a perfect family, not even a comfortable family, but a family nonetheless. Madison would share school drama. Tyler would debate political philosophy. Jennifer would tell stories from her cases. Michael and Margaret would offer stilted contributions, still finding their place in the redefined dynamic. I'd watch them all and feel a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at what had been taken, gratitude for what remained, uncertainty about the future. But underneath it all, satisfaction. I'd refused to be erased. I claimed my space, my voice, my value. At 75, I'd learned that survival sometimes requires ruthlessness, that love without boundaries enables destruction, that family can be rebuilt from wreckage if everyone commits to the work. 6 months after Christmas Eve, on a warm June evening, I sat on the front porch watching the garden bloom. Richard's roses were thriving. I'd hired a landscaper with some of my protected funds, refusing to let his legacy decay. Tyler joined me, settling into the chair beside mine. Grandma? I got my college acceptance. Full ride to state. Starting in September. Pride flooded through me. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your grandfather would be so proud. I wanted to tell you first. Before Dad. Because, he paused, choosing words carefully. Because you've been the one showing me what integrity actually looks like. Not just talking about values but living them even when it's hard. I want you to know that watching you handle this year, it's changed how I think about strength. Tears pricked my eyes. You've changed how I think about hope. You and Madison. You remind me why the fight mattered. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in oranges and purples. Inside, I could hear dinner preparations. Margaret cooking, Michael setting the table, Madison on a phone call with friends. The sounds of life, messy and imperfect but undeniably present. My house. My family. My terms. It had cost everything to reclaim them, but looking at my grandson beside me, watching the home I'd built glow in the evening light, I knew with absolute certainty, it was worth it. The deed in my envelope had been more than legal documentation. It had been a declaration. Evelyn Harper exists. She matters. She will not be disappeared. And when her family tried to erase her, she'd walked back into her own story and rewritten the ending on her own terms. At 75, I'd learned that survival isn't passive. It's a choice renewed daily, to claim space in a world that would prefer you diminish quietly. I'd chosen differently. And in choosing, I'd taught my grandchildren the most important lesson I had to offer. Your value doesn't depend on others' recognition. It exists independent of their acknowledgement. And when they try to take it from you, you fight. Not with bitterness or cruelty, but with clarity and consequence. You fight because you matter. Because your story deserves telling. Because you've earned every inch of ground you stand on. They'd said I wasn't family anymore. I'd walked in with the deed and reminded them. I wasn't just family. I was the foundation everything was built on. And foundations don't disappear just because people stop noticing them. They endure. They support. And when pushed too far, they enforce their boundaries with the full weight of accumulated strength. I was 75 years old. I'd survived widowhood, single parenthood, financial hardship and family betrayal. I'd reclaimed my home, my dignity and my power. And I was nowhere near finished living. The roses Richard planted decades ago bloomed beside me. Proof that beauty persists through seasons of neglect if the roots run deep enough. My roots ran deep. And I was blooming again, fierce and vibrant, in the garden I'd refused to abandon. They tried to write me out. Instead, I'd written the ending myself. And it was beautiful.